Ladies and gentlemen, the President.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, this evening, we're going to once again vote to begin consideration of the Genius Act. And I'm hoping that the second time will be the charm. We were here 11 days ago, Mr. President, in the same place when Democrats inexplicably chose to block this legislation. The question is why? Well, that's a good question, Mr. President. Stablecoin regulation is a bipartisan issue. This bill reflects the bipartisan consensus on this issue. And it's had an open and bipartisan process since the very beginning. What we used around here to call regular order. In March, the Banking Committee marked up the bill text considering 40 amendments. And the bill ultimately passed out of the committee by a vote of 18-6 with support from 5 Democrats. And since then, both Republicans and Democrat members have worked to advance this legislation. That is, until a week and a half ago when Democrats suddenly decided to block it just as we were getting ready to have a debate on the floor. Mr. President, the bill brought up a week and a half ago is the exact same bill the Democrats apparently now are willing to move forward on. And then, as now, Republicans were committed to a full debate on the floor with the chance for further bipartisan amendments to the already bipartisan piece of legislation. So it's really hard to understand why we needed to wait an additional 11 days for Democrats to finally agree to move. I'm not sure Democrats wanted to deny Republicans and President Trump a bipartisan legislative victory and then perhaps thought better of their obstruction, or what. But at least we finally seem to be here, Mr. President, ready to take up this bill. Because this is important legislation. The use of cryptocurrency has exploded from the margins to the mainstream, and stablecoins have emerged as a key part of the crypto ecosystem. They offer the speed and security of the blockchain with the stability and usability of the dollar bill. And they provide a business and consumer-friendly way to make payments. But stablecoin issuers and users face challenges. In the United States, stablecoins have operated in a legal gray zone. There are no clear rules of the road to follow. And between that and the Biden administration's targeting crypto companies with numerous lawsuits, many U.S.-based crypto companies have contemplated moving overseas. Not something we want to see if we want the United States to remain at the forefront of financial innovation. Fortunately, the Genius Act addresses these problems by providing a clear regulatory framework for stablecoins, a framework that will protect consumers and our national security while helping to keep the United States at the forefront of financial innovation. The bill will also create demand for the U.S. dollar and U.S. treasuries, a good thing for both our national security and our fiscal house. So this is an important bill, Mr. President, and I'm glad that it looks like we are finally going to be able to take it up. And I hope that in the future, we'll be able to take up bipartisan legislation without these unnecessary delays. I want to again thank my colleagues from both parties for their work on this bill. Senators Hagerty, Lummis, and Tim Scott have worked tirelessly with Senators Gillibrand and also Brooks and their members. and they all deserve a ton of credit for listening to their respective sides of the aisle. So, Mr. President, I look forward to beginning the floor debate later today. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Or call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks.
Great job. That was a great job. Well, I want to thank everybody. We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. 5,000 young people every single week are being killed. So hopefully we did something. We also spoke to the heads of most of the European nations, and we're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up. What a shame that it ever started in the first place. So, but I want to thank Melania and for your leadership in this very important issue. It's an amazing issue. America is blessed to have such a dedicated and compassionate First Lady. I would tell you she is very dedicated. In fact, if you look at just what I heard, Putin just said they respect your wife a lot. I said, what about me? No, they like Melania better. That wasn't good. I don't know if that was good. I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I also want to congratulate the First Lady in securing $25 million in the first fiscal year, 2026, budget to provide housing and support for youth transitioning out of the foster care. And I can say that she loves children, and you really worked very hard on this, and you had a lot of help from some friends of mine right here, and a lot of the senators are here and congressmen, and I appreciate you all being here. We're also grateful to be joined by people that are just in love with what we're doing. It's such an important situation, and commissioners of the Federal Trade Commission and the CEO of X, Linda Yaccarino. Where are you, Linda? Where are you, Linda? Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Stand up. Thank you, Linda. Great job. You're doing a great job. It's a big deal, right? That's great. Today, it's my honor to officially sign the Take It Down Act into law. It's a big thing, very important, so horrible what takes place. This will be the first ever federal law to combat the distribution of explicit, imaginary, posted without subjects' consent. They take horrible pictures, and I guess sometimes even make up the pictures, and they post it without consent or anything else. And very importantly, this includes for forgeries generated by artificial intelligence known as deepfakes. We've all heard about deepfakes. I have them all the time, but nobody does anything. I asked Pam, can you help me, Pam? She says, no, I'm too busy doing other things. Don't worry, you'll survive. But a lot of people don't survive. That's true, and so horrible. With the rise of AI image generation, countless women have been harassed with deepfakes and other explicit images distributed against their will. This is the wrong, and it's just so horribly wrong. And it's a very abusive situation, like in some cases people have never seen before. And today we're making it totally illegal. Thank you. Upon hearing the stories of so many women affected, our First Lady made stopping these abuses a top priority, and she was given tremendous support because she'd go up to people and talk about it. They say, yeah, we know about it. We have the problem. Can we do something? And she did something about it with the help of a lot of the people, especially the political people sitting here today. Among Melania's guests in the gallery during my address to the joint session of Congress was a 15-year-old young person, Elliston Berry, whose image was turned into an illicit deepfake by a peer. Elliston, where are you? Are you around? Stand up, darling. That's fine. Beautiful. Great. Thank you. It's fantastic. Elliston quickly became a powerful advocate committed to preventing other girls from suffering the same abuse. Elliston, we salute you and we thank you very much. And it's an honor to have you with us today. Great job you've done. Also with us are several other brave Americans whose lives were rocked by online harassment, including Francesca Manny, as well as a South Carolina State Representative, Brandon Guffey, and his family, who've lost their son to suicide after he was targeted in an internet extortion scam, of which you have a lot of them, a lot. I want to thank you both for your incredible work and to reach this important day. Could you stand up, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. Great job. I've read about it. Thank you very much. It's a real honor to have you here because there's no place like the White House, I found out. You know, you have a lot of places, and I just left some of the richest places, and we loved them, and they gave us a nice contribution of about $5 trillion, but this is a special place. Even they talk about it, so it's great to have everybody here. Under the law, I will sign in just a moment. Anyone who intentionally distributes explicit images without the subject's consent will face up to 3 years in prison. In addition, this law establishes new civil liabilities for online platforms that refuse to take these images down promptly upon request. We will not tolerate online sexual exploitation, and especially it's gone on at levels that nobody's ever seen before. It's getting worse and worse, and I think this is going to hopefully stop it. And not easy to do. People talked about all sorts of First Amendment, Second Amendment. They talked about any amendment they could make up, and we got it through because of some very brave people, including some very brave politicians in the audience. I want to thank the bill sponsor, Senator Ted Cruz. Ted, stand up, please. Great. Great. Thank you, Ted. It's great. Very effective person. And Congresswoman Maria Salazar, friend of mine. Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much for their amazing work. And thanks also to the 99 senators and 408 members of Congress who voted in favor of the bill. Wow, I wish we could get that vote from other things. We have another bill coming up. Do you think we'll get that vote? Maybe not. We should, but we probably won't. But working with our First Lady, we've shown that bipartisanship is still possible. That's true. With 99 senators, that's incredible. Senators, stand up. Look at that. John, you're here. Look at all of the senators. This is big stuff. I'm in trouble because I don't have your names. They didn't give me these names. We have so many. We have half of the Senate here. Now they're all going to hate me because I can't introduce you. We don't have the time for that. I have to get back to Putin and people. But thank you very much for being here, all of you, and congressmen, a lot of them, and women. Working with our First Lady, though, we've shown that bipartisanship is possible. I mean, it's the first time I've seen such a level of bipartisanship, and it's a beautiful thing to do. I'm not even sure you realize, honey, you know, a lot of the Democrats and Republicans don't get along so well. You've made them get along, and she didn't even know about that. She didn't know we had a problem. She didn't know we had a problem. She got it. But I want to thank you, honey. You've done amazing that this was done when you started. And I said, I don't know, it sounds like a tough one and yet a very important one. And you got it done. So I congratulate you. And I congratulate Ted, Maria, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll sign the bill. Thank you. That's your name, Chuck Wesley. It's been around a long time, huh? Come on around. That's beautiful. Come on around. Hey, look at that.
Thank you.
You did it. Put it out of our got it. Thank you.
Thanks for your leadership made this happen. So thank you, Mr. President.
I know. Thanks, Maria. That's fantastic. Okay, you ready? Okay, honey, you signing something? You want to sign it in? Come on, sign it anyway. What, she deserves to sign it. Okay, there we have it.
There we are.
That's a big one. Thank you very much, everyone. And you have some pens here. You most importantly, right? Grab one of them. Oh, look at these white pens. I've never seen that before. I want one of them. I've never seen them. Here, Pamela, take that. Take that. Thank you very much. Everybody.
Thank
Just
you.
grab
Thank you
it.
so much.
Okay. Thank you,
Yes,
everybody.
thank you.
You go ahead.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. President, let me introduce you to Brandon, who lost his son Gavin.
Let me get up.
He's a state legislator in South Carolina. He's been incredibly brave, and his whole family. So,
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain at your seats until the President and the First Lady has departed the Rose Garden. Thank you.
Mr. President, this evening, we're going to once again vote to begin consideration of the Genius Act. And I'm hoping that the second time will be the charm. We were here 11 days ago, Mr. President, in the same place when Democrats inexplicably chose to block this legislation. The question is why? Well, that's a good question, Mr. President. Stablecoin regulation is a bipartisan issue. This bill reflects the bipartisan consensus on this issue. And it's had an open and bipartisan process since the very beginning. What we used around here to call regular order. In March, the Banking Committee marked up the bill text considering 40 amendments. And the bill ultimately passed out of the committee by a vote of 18-6 with support from 5 Democrats. And since then, both Republicans and Democrat members have worked to advance this legislation. That is, until a week and a half ago when Democrats suddenly decided to block it just as we were getting ready to have a debate on the floor. Mr. President, the bill brought up a week and a half ago is the exact same bill the Democrats apparently now are willing to move forward on. And then, as now, Republicans were committed to a full debate on the floor with the chance for further bipartisan amendments to the already bipartisan piece of legislation. So it's really hard to understand why we needed to wait an additional 11 days for Democrats to finally agree to move. I'm not sure Democrats wanted to deny Republicans and President Trump a bipartisan legislative victory, and then perhaps thought better of their obstruction, or what. But at least we finally seem to be here, Mr. President, ready to take up this bill. Because this is important legislation. The use of cryptocurrency has exploded from the margins to the mainstream, and stablecoins have emerged as a key part of the crypto ecosystem. They offer the speed and security of the blockchain with the stability and usability of the dollar bill. And they provide a business and consumer-friendly way to make payments. But stablecoin issuers and users face challenges. In the United States, stablecoins have operated in a legal gray zone. There are no clear rules of the road to follow. And between that and the Biden administration's targeting crypto companies with numerous lawsuits, many U.S.-based crypto companies have contemplated moving overseas. Not something we want to see if we want the United States to remain at the forefront of financial innovation. Fortunately, the Genius Act addresses these problems by providing a clear regulatory framework for stablecoins, a framework that will protect consumers and our national security while helping to keep the United States at the forefront of financial innovation. The bill will also create demand for the U.S. dollar and U.S. treasuries, a good thing for both our national security and our fiscal house. So this is an important bill, Mr. President, and I'm glad that it looks like we are finally going to be able to take it up. And I hope that in the future, we will be able to take up bipartisan legislation without these unnecessary delays. I want to again thank my colleagues from both parties for their work on this bill. Senators Hagerty, Lummis, and Tim Scott have worked tirelessly with Senators Gillibrand and also Brooks and their members. And they all deserve a ton of credit for listening to their respective sides of the aisle. So, Mr. President, I look forward to beginning the floor debate later today. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us early today. We have a very busy day, so we wanted to kick off the week right this morning after a great trip last week. It's good to see all of you back in Washington. This afternoon in the Rose Garden, President Trump, alongside First Lady Melania Trump, will sign the Take It Down Act into law. First Lady Melania Trump was instrumental in getting this important legislation passed. The Take It Down Act will protect victims of digital exploitation, hold internet platforms accountable by requiring them to remove such imagery from their platforms, and provide justice for victims by allowing prosecutors to go after those who publish non-consensual explicit images online. The First Lady met with members in the House and the Senate, survivors and their families, and advocates throughout the process to get this bill across the finish line. We are grateful for the First Lady's hard work and dedication to this issue. And moving forward, she will continue to champion the well-being of our nation's children through her Be Best agenda. I know the President looks forward to signing that bill into law later this afternoon, and we will see you all there. In other news, the One Big Beautiful Bill passed the House Budget Committee last night, bringing it one step closer to final passage. The One Big Beautiful Bill is perfectly named because it represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver on the Make America Great Again agenda responsible for President Trump's landslide victory on November 5th. The America First policies in this bill are the reason why Republicans currently have the majority in Congress right now. Passing this bill is what voters sent Republicans to Washington to accomplish. And that's why it's essential that every Republican in the House and the Senate unites behind President Trump and passes this popular and essential legislative package. This bill will be the single most pro-small business, pro-family, and pro-American worker legislation ever. This bill will give Americans the largest tax cuts in our nation's history. When Republicans pass the bill, Americans will be keeping more of their hard-earned money and taking home much bigger paychecks. The One Big Beautiful Bill will deliver some of President Trump's central campaign promises. No tax on tips for our hardworking waiters, waitresses, and service workers. No tax on overtime for our law enforcement officers, our firefighters, and all those Americans who are putting in extra hours to make ends meet. And a large tax deduction on interest payments for Americans who purchase American-made cars. Despite desperate Democrat lies, the biggest beneficiary of this tax cut will be working-class Americans and their families. Americans earning between $30,000 and $80,000 per year will pay about 15% less in taxes after this legislation is passed. And according to a brand new paper from the White House Council of Economic Advisors, the average family with 2 children's take-home pay will be up to $13,000 higher because of the increase in wages and reductions in tax obligations. The CEA study also said that the average overtime worker receives a tax cut of roughly $2,000. Again, this is great news for our nurses, our police officers, and all those who work overtime to make ends meet across our country. Put simply, President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill will be a boon for working-class America. This One Big Beautiful Bill is also pro-family. It will increase the child tax credit to $2,500 per child, establish optional savings account for newborn babies with a $1,000 credit added, and strengthen paid family leave. This bill also delivers historic tax relief to America's seniors by allowing middle and low-income Social Security recipients to deduct an additional $4,000 in payments from their taxable income. If Democrats get their way and the Trump tax cuts are not extended, Americans will face the largest tax hike in history to the tune of $4 trillion. Republicans must not side with Democrats in helping them raise taxes. The One Big Beautiful Bill also provides critical protections of Medicaid, which will strengthen and preserve the program for decades to come through common sense efforts to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. Medicaid will no longer be used to pay for barbaric gender mutilation procedures on minor children. And the 1.4 million illegal aliens who are currently improperly receiving Medicaid benefits will be kicked off the program to preserve it for hardworking American citizens who need it. President Trump and Republicans are protecting Medicaid benefits for pregnant women, children, disabled individuals, low-income seniors and families, and the most vulnerable Americans in our society. And that's what Democrats are so angry about. Basic Medicaid protections that will stop the funding of transgender insanity and illegal aliens from ripping off American taxpayers. As you all know, over his first 4 months in office, President Trump ended the previous administration's open border crisis and secured our homeland in record time, all using executive authority. Now Congress needs to act. The One Big Beautiful Bill is the most significant investment in our nation's border patrol and law enforcement agents in our nation's history. The bill ensures that President Trump's popular and successful border security measures are made permanent. Republicans have the backs of Border Patrol and ICE agents who were put through hell over the past 4 years and have quickly worked to secure our southern border. And that's why this bill gives them more resources to do their jobs, including a $10,000 much-needed bonus to ICE agents and Border Patrol agents over the next 4 years. To provide those brave agents with desperately needed reinforcements on the ground, the bill allows for the hiring of thousands of new ICE personnel, customs officers, and Border Patrol agents. These significant hirings will empower President Trump to continue delivering on his promise to carry out the largest mass deportation in the history of our country. Again, that is a promise that Republicans made to American voters. It's a promise they were elected on, and it's a promise Republicans on Capitol Hill need to keep: secure our border. To supplement those efforts, the bill's funds will fund the completion of President Trump's signature border wall. As a result, $701 miles of primary wall, 900 miles of river barriers, 629 miles of secondary barriers, and 141 miles of vehicle and pedestrian barriers will be constructed when this bill passes, along with cutting-edge technology to secure our homeland from dangerous illegal alien invaders. This bill also advances our national security and defense interests by ensuring the United States military has the necessary resources to remain the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world. The bill will provide resources for the construction of President Trump's Golden Dome to safeguard Americans from potential attacks, give the Coast Guard resources to build more modernized ships, and the Air Force resources to acquire better planes. If all of those incredible things were not enough, the big, beautiful bill also finally modernizes air traffic control in America, a bipartisan issue. The bill will allow President Trump to deliver on his promise to overhaul and update our air traffic control systems to keep Americans flying as safe and efficiently as possible. The previous administration failed to act and do this themselves, despite repeated warnings from the GAO, which has resulted in unacceptable delays at major airports like Newark that the Trump administration is working hard to address. When the One Big Beautiful bill passes, we will replace the current antiquated system. The FAA will enhance safety in our skies, reduce delays, and power the future of air travel in the United States. That's just some of what this historic legislation will accomplish. It is absolutely essential that Republicans unite behind the One Big Beautiful bill and deliver on President Trump's agenda. There is no time to waste. Americans gave Republicans a once-in-a-generation opportunity to course-correct our country over many wrongs over the past 4 years. And Americans are counting on Republicans to work as hard as President Trump is in this White House every day on Capitol Hill. Send this legislation to his desk as soon as possible for his signature. Here in our new media seat today, we have Liam Cosgrove, the White House correspondent for Zero Hedge. With that, Liam, please kick us off.
Thank you, Caroline. So first question is on foreign policy.
Sure.
The president has made several moves towards peace in multiple fronts, India, Pakistan with the Houthis, talking with Iran, talking with Putin. Biden didn't even talk to Putin for the entire span of the war, which is crazy considering two nuclear powers were engaged in a proxy war. So I do admire these moves by the current president, I'll be honest. However, as of today, we are still funding both Israel's and Ukraine's wars. So can Americans expect to finally be done financing foreign wars at some point? Do you consider that one of the president's goals?
Well, I think I can summarize the president's foreign policy agenda with 2 words: America first. And that means putting the American people and the American taxpayer first. And that's why the president is moving as quickly as he possibly can and working overtime to end these conflicts in both Israel and in Gaza, and also the Russia-Ukraine war. As you all know, the president will be speaking with Putin at 10 o'clock. He plans to call President Zelensky when that call concludes. I spoke to the president about that call at 10 o'clock. I don't want to get ahead of those very important conversations, but of course you will hear directly from the president or me after those calls conclude today. So you can expect that. As for Israel and Gaza, the president continues to not only himself, but his national security team engage in talks on both sides of this conflict. The president made it very clear to Hamas that he wanted to see all hostages released. And last week, when we were flying out of town, there was great news on that front with the return of Eden Alexander, who is the last remaining hostage in Gaza. So to answer your question, the president is always thinking about the American people, the American taxpayer first. He wants these conflicts to end, not just to save money, but most importantly, to save lives.
Thank you. And my only other question for you is, so over the weekend, President Trump posted Truth Social a video highlighting what most people call the Clinton body count, which is the strange number of suicides that seem to happen in Clinton circles. I have a headline here from the Washington Post that said, Trump peddles false conspiracy theories tying the Clintons to several deaths. So I just wanted to highlight real quick, this wasn't in Trump's video, but this is from the Arkansas Times, and it's the death of Mark Middleton, who was a former Clinton White House aide, who was found dead on a Clinton Foundation property. And I'll just quote from the Arkansas Times. Middleton apparently shot himself in the chest with a shotgun and also hung himself from a tree with an extension cord. So I have no idea how somebody commits suicide that way, but if the Washington Post is here, maybe you can enlighten us as to how that was actually a suicide. So anyways, that's just a lead into my question about the most famous Clinton-related suicide, which is that of Jeffrey Epstein. There's still a lot of questions around that case. You've released phase 1 of the Epstein files. what was missing from that is any connection to his ties to intelligence agencies. And that's really the whole story, that not just trafficking young girls, but doing it on behalf of intelligence agencies and even potentially as part of a blackmail ring with potential ties to the Israeli government. So for phase 2, when can we expect it? Will it have information pertaining to those aspects of the Epstein case?
I know the Attorney General has committed to releasing those files. I would defer you to the Department of Justice on her timeline, but when she has made a promise in the past, she has kept it, and I'm certain that she will in this case as well. Rachel.
Thanks so much, Caroline. The president set a 2-week deadline for Ukraine and Russia to negotiate a deal. That time is now up. Does the president intend to set a new deadline on this call with President Putin? And how much longer is he willing to give these talks?
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of the specifics of the conversation the president will be having with President Putin in less than an hour this morning. But he has made clear throughout the entirety of this conflict, since he inherited it from Joe Biden. Don't forget, this is a war that began because of the previous administration's incompetence and weakness, and President Trump is working very hard to fix it. He has made it clear to both sides that he wants to see a peaceful resolution and a ceasefire as soon as possible. But as for specifics on a timeline, I won't get ahead of the president.
And just on the goals for this call in particular, is the goal to get Putin to agree to a ceasefire? Is the goal to lead to some sort of in-person negotiations with Putin and the president?
Well, I think, again, we'll see how the call goes. And the president has made it clear his goal is to see a ceasefire and to see this conflict come to an end. And he's grown weary and frustrated with both sides of the conflict. The president and his team have put an enormous amount of effort in solving this very complicated war that, again, began because of the last administration's weakness.
Does he still want to meet Putin personally?
I think the president would certainly be open to that, but let's see how this call goes today.
What's the status of the secondary sanctions package? The president's been talking about that. You haven't imposed them yet, but is that still on the table?
I think everything's on the table, yes. And again, I won't get ahead of the president in any commitments or decisions, but certainly it's something he's been looking at and discussing. Elena.
Hi, Ken. I'm going to ask you about the House budget bill. So does the president agree with Republicans behind this bill that Medicaid work requirements should be implemented as soon as 2026?
So the president wants to preserve and protect Medicaid for Americans who this program was intended for, the most vulnerable in our society: pregnant women, low-income families, seniors, those who truly need these benefits. And it should be going to people who physically cannot work. We want to see able-bodied Americans at least working 20 hours per week, whether that's part-time or full-time, whether that's even looking for work or volunteering for 20 hours a week if they are receiving Medicaid. These are common sense provisions. These are common sense changes that were actually introduced by former Democrat President Clinton. They've been supported by every Democrat president since, including the previous president, Joe Biden. But again, these are common sense reforms to ensure that those that this program was intended for receive those benefits.
And then just a quick follow-up. Is the president okay with this bill adding to the deficit?
This bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors, this bill will save $1.6 trillion. And the president absolutely understands and hears the concerns of fiscal conservatives and of Americans who want to get our fiscal house in order. That's what the intention of this bill is. There's $1.6 trillion worth of savings in this bill. That's the largest savings for any legislation that has ever passed Capitol Hill in our nation's history. The next bill that even comes close was $800 billion. That's less than half of the savings that we see in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so the goal of this bill is to produce economic growth, to cut taxes, and to get our fiscal house in order. And this is the right step in the right direction towards doing that.
Thanks.
Edward.
Yes, thanks.
And then I'll go to you.
Thanks,
You're welcome.
I want to get the president's reaction to Moody's downgrading the credit rating of the United States.
Sure. Well, look, the president talked about this over the weekend. The Secretary of Treasury also talked about it. When you look at the world has confidence in the United States of America and our economy once again. The president just last week secured trillions of dollars in investments from countries in the Middle East. We have seen trillions of dollars of investments flowing into our economy since the president took office. That is because America or people around the world have confidence in the United States of America. And if you also just look at the raw economic data that we're seeing, last week when we were out of town, inflation dropped once again. Oil prices are dropping, gas prices are dropping. The president has added nearly 500,000 jobs to the American economy already. So there's a lot of optimism in this economy, and the president disagrees with that assessment.
And I want to ask you one more thing, if I could. On your Middle East trip, the United Arab Emirates is getting some of the most advanced AI chips, and there's agreements there. The UAE is the newest member of BRICS. Is there a concern from the president that those chips and the technology will pass through to China, India, Russia, and Iran?
Part of going to the Middle East was to ensure that the United States, that this part of the region, our Gulf partners, know that the United States of America is there for them again, and that they should be investing in the United States, not in China. And these AI agreements, particularly the one the Secretary of Commerce signed in the UAE, has security guarantees to ensure that China is not getting the advantage, but the United States is getting the advantage when it comes to AI, and that the UAE and the U.S. are working hand in hand together to invest in this space. So read the agreements, there are security guarantees, and this was a great trip for the country, no doubt. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has said today that Israel will take control of all of Gaza. Is that a goal that President Trump is comfortable with, or that he supports?
I'll have to talk to the president about those comments as they just came, I believe, from the prime minister this morning, and I'll let him speak on that. The president has made it very clear he wants to see this conflict in the region end. He wants all hostages to be released. He was pleased that Eden Alexander was returned home safely to his loving family. The president spoke with Eden directly while we were traveling to the Middle East last week. As for the prime minister's comments, I'll let the president himself respond to those. Sure.
Two questions. One, how involved does the president intend to be directly in talking to members about the bill over the next couple of weeks or the next week?
Sure. Well, over the weekend, the president was in direct conversation and communication with the Speaker of the House. He's been very involved. He always is. He's willing to pick up the phone when he is asked to. So he'll continue to be very engaged in this process with both House members and his friends on the Senate side as well.
And on former President Biden's cancer diagnosis, the president put out a very nice message on Truth Social. Has he talked to President Biden directly? Does he intend to call? What does he intend to say directly?
Not to my knowledge. I don't believe they have spoken, but I'm sure the president would be open to doing that. I spoke to him last night about the former president's cancer diagnosis, and the statement that he put out was the initial reaction he had with me on the phone as well. Peter.
Follow up on former President Biden. White House doctors may have missed the early stages of his prostate cancer. So is President Trump worried about the quality of care that presidents get here?
Not as far as President Trump is concerned. The White House physician we have here is phenomenal, and the team of physicians that take care of the president, particularly at Walter Reed Medical Center, are great. The president had his physical recently, as you know. He had perfect results. He's in very good shape. I think those of you who traveled to the Middle East with us last week can attest to the president's endurance. And by the way, I will add, we returned home from a very long and tiring trip last week. And on Saturday, where was the president? In the Oval Office working all day. He doesn't stop. He doesn't quit. He's in great health, and he trusts his physicians.
Two more things. Putin ghosted everybody at these peace talks last week. As President Trump phones him today to try to figure out an end to the Ukraine war, does he think that Putin is the good guy or the bad guy?
I'll let the president speak on that conversation later. He's made his feelings about both sides of this war quite clear throughout it. He wants to see it end.
And the last one, what does President Trump mean when he says that Taylor Swift is no longer hot?
Look, he is speaking about Taylor Swift's political views and how perhaps it has impacted the support of the American public for her work. And I will leave it at that. Annie, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. I'm just going back one more time to the White House Medical Office, because there seems to be some question about this with regard to President Biden's screening. Can you say whether or not President Trump is screened for prostate cancer as part of his physical?
Are we in a quorum call?
We are.
I ask consent to be suspended.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me tell you a story. It's one of the oldest in our country. It is a story of the American dream. It's one of perseverance, where anyone, regardless of their background or circumstances, can achieve success and upward mobility through hard work and determination. It means a job that pays a fair wage, a school that prepares our kids for a better life, a doctor who sees you when you're sick, and a roof over your head at night. We're now in the midst of debating soon a reconciliation bill. For those not familiar with the term, it is basically a special budget bill. If you consider this a legislative organization or body, and I do, if we were accused of legislating this year, I'm afraid there's not enough evidence to convict us. We've been in session now for 5 months. We've passed 5 bills, one a month. If we were being paid for piecework, we would have been left behind for the last 5 months. But now comes this reconciliation bill and tries to do everything at once. It's starting over in the House of Representatives. Assuming it passes there, it will come over here. What does it do, this reconciliation bill, this spending bill, budget cutting bill? It dismantles the American dream. It strips our institutions of essential services that help the most vulnerable people in our country, all so that the ultimate goal can be served. And what is that goal? To give larger tax breaks to wealthy people. If you don't have time to read more than 1,000 pages of these cuts in this reconciliation bill, let me give you a shortened version. It isn't pretty. Billionaires will win, American families will lose. President Trump asked Republicans in Congress to provide a massive giveaway to the richest Americans. And they want to use programs like Medicaid cuts, food and nutrition programs, and medical research funding as a piggy bank for these tax cuts for wealthy people. Let's take Medicaid, for example. Medicaid insures 1 in 4 people in my home state of Illinois. 1 out of 4. 3.4 million people on Medicaid, including 1.5 million children. How important is it? Medicaid is a program, insurance program, covers nearly half of all births in our state. 2/3 of nursing home residents receive Medicaid assistance. That's your mom, your dad, your grandparents. And the majority of patients with mental health counseling count on Medicaid. The majority of the money for mental health counseling comes from that program. It's a lifeline for children's hospitals. It's a lifeline for rural hospitals. Knowing how unpopular it is to deprive America of health care, for months the Republicans have said Democrats have got it all wrong. We're not cutting Medicaid benefits. We're simply focusing on waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, if there's a program that's wasteful or fraudulent, put me in line to do something about it. I don't want to say any taxpayers' money wasted. But that's not what's happening here. And I'm afraid my colleagues on the other side of the aisle know it. With their plans, Republicans are taking a chainsaw to our healthcare system and ripping health insurance away. At the end of the day, their reconciliation proposal will remove Medicaid insurance for 14 million Americans. Mr. President, if you've ever lived in a circumstance where you had no health insurance, it's a sobering, unforgettable experience. I've been there. A sick child and no health insurance. It's something you'll never forget. The reconciliation plan of the Republicans buries eligible patients in complex paperwork requirements that'll wrap them in so much red tape they'll never get the care they need. Just think if you have an illness in the family, a serious illness, and you have to go through a high-stakes government red tape gauntlet, another government form, another telephone recording when you need a helping hand. And it decimates the funding system for Medicaid, which will force rural hospitals to cut services or close altogether. 3 weeks ago, 20 hospital administrators from my state came. Most of them were from downstate, where I live, where I grew up. They told the story of what the reconciliation bill means to them: cutting services in communities, closing down critical hospitals. Instead of 20 minutes for that pregnant woman with her first baby to get to the doctor, to get to the hospital, instead of 20 minutes, it'll be an hour and 20 minutes. Does it make a difference? How would you like to be driving the car under those circumstances? You'll never forget it. Republicans are also targeting food and nutrition programs like SNAP. 40 million Americans rely on these programs to provide food on the table, including nearly 2 million in Illinois. They are looking to cut food and nutrition benefits by as much as $290 billion. The largest cut to anti-hunger funding in our nation's history. I was home in Springfield over the weekend. My wife came back from the grocery store and she said, "I can't believe these prices. Prices are too high and they keep going higher." And what do the Republicans want to do? Cut the benefits to pay for the food that people need to put on the table. It'll take food assistance away from 6 million Americans. And how much money do people receive? Well, it turns out the average SNAP recipient, the Food and Nutrition Program at the federal level, the average recipient is paid $5 a day. Try to live on $5 a day and imagine what their life must be like. That's right. The Republican reconciliation bill will take food off the table of seniors and children so they can pay for these billionaire tax cuts. If that sounds like an exaggeration, it's not. As Republicans strip Americans of their health care and SNAP benefits, millionaires and billionaires will continue to see tax breaks coming their way. In their bill, Republicans give huge tax breaks to multi-billion-dollar corporations. They exempt up to $28 million in taxes from estates where the wealthiest Americans pass on their wealth to their children. In the same breath, they fail to expand the child tax credit, which is one of the most effective tools to reduce poverty and put money back in the pockets of working families. Remember, it was Democrats who expanded the child tax credit in the American Rescue Plan, which led to a historic reduction in poverty in the U.S. Research showed that child poverty fell immediately and substantially to the lowest on record, 5.2%. So who needs a tax break? Working families are the wealthiest people in our country. For me, the answer is obvious. Republicans are also planning to eliminate the Clean Energy Tax Credit enacted in the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act, which would derail efforts to strengthen U.S. energy security and lower costs. This would hurt American families and small businesses by hitting them with higher energy bills and the loss of nearly 800,000 jobs over the next 5 years. Some states could see double-digit percentage increases in electricity bills, which means hundreds of dollars out of Americans' pockets each year. Just a few hours ago, the White House claimed that their reckless plan, quote, does not add to the deficit. Someone said that with a straight face. But in reality, it explodes the deficit under the guise of fiscal responsibility. The White House and Republican reconciliation plan would add $3.3 trillion to the nation's deficit over the next 10 years for tax breaks for wealthy people. President Trump's record-breaking deficit in his first term will reach new depths of debt to pay for billionaire tax cuts. Donald Trump is claiming that his sprawling trade war will somehow pay this bill, but no one buys that, and no one can even explain it the way he does. America's small businesses, workers, farmers, and families are hurting because of this administration's tariffs, while the president continues to weaken America's credibility and alienate us from our biggest trading partners. If all of this wasn't bad enough, Republican Speaker Johnson cut a deal with members of the House Freedom Caucus over the weekend in order to move this bill. It is reported that they discussed accelerating the plan to condition Medicaid health coverage on red tape requirements. These were originally set for 2029. They now want to end people's insurance as soon as possible, maybe by the end of this year, as well as quicker phase out of clean energy tax credits that were put into law as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. That's right, the package isn't bad enough for conservative Republicans to support, so they're considering making it even worse for American families. Americans of all political affiliations rely on critical services that Republicans plan to cut, not just Democrats. Slashing life-saving health care, cutting food and nutrition benefits for mothers trying to feed their families will hurt Americans in blue and red states. I've heard my colleagues give speeches about tough choices. Well, let me tell you, choosing to line the pockets of people like Elon Musk while cutting life-saving medical research isn't tough, it's shameful. American families aren't asking for special treatment. They're asking for a fair shot at the American dream. They're asking us to remember this country works best when we invest in its people. We need 4 Republicans with the good sense to join Democrats and say no to this disaster. 2 have already stepped forward. We need 2 more. The sooner the better. I yield the floor.
On President Biden, have you had a chance to speak with him at all since his diagnosis, or do you intend to? And then secondly, just on Medicaid, I know for many months now you've been warning about the implications of cutting Medicaid. It seems there's some renewed discussions about FMAP and putting it back into the reconciliation bill. What are your chief concerns if that happens?
I have not had the opportunity to speak to President Biden subsequent to the news of the diagnosis becoming public yesterday. I do expect at some point in time, I will speak directly to him to more directly communicate, my thoughts and prayers and that of the House Democratic Caucus. In terms of the Republican obsession with taking away health care from the American people, this is something that they've been trying to do for decades. And
you're from Colorado.
Mr. President, I come to the floor today to honor the incredible life of Reverend Dr. James D. Peters, seated here. Reverend Dr. James D. Peters, Jr., I should say, who passed away last week at the age of 92. And what a life he lived. James was truly one of the greatest men I've ever known. Reverend Peters' story started not far from these walls here in Washington, D.C. He grew up in Washington during a time of deep segregation and became an early leader in the civil rights movements of the 1950s, the 1960s, and into the 1970s. In 1957, he helped found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference along with Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. He worked with Dr. King for many years to help shape the course of American history. He marched unbowed in the March on Washington in 1963 and numerous other marches, notably Selma, across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965. Reverend Peters carried that same commitment when he came to Denver and to Colorado, that same commitment to justice. For more than 28 years, he preached Dr. King's gospel of freedom and unity as pastor of the New Hope Baptist Church, the largest Black church in Denver. He also served many years on the Colorado Civil Rights Commission to make Colorado a better place for all our residents. Along the way, he had a significant impact on many of Colorado's leaders. I was one of them. In 2003, I was the newly elected mayor of Denver, not quite inaugurated yet, when on July 5th, Paul Childs was shot and killed in his own front hall by an inexperienced Denver police officer. Paul was only 15 years old, but he was beloved by his community, and his death shook the entire city. Following that awful tragedy, Reverend Peters, alongside my predecessor, Wellington Webb, who was one of the great mayors of the 20th century, They helped organize their community and mentored me on the appropriate ways to address this tragedy in such a way that it could be constructive, that somehow the community would be made stronger and more resilient. Reverend Peters knew that the community had to change and use this tragedy to make a better future for the entire community. He was one of those leaders who helped us create Denver's first citizen oversight board to oversee the Denver police and sheriff departments and make sure any allegations of police misconduct could be investigated, and to make sure that all neighborhoods had an active voice in how their neighborhoods were policed. He also helped us start the Office of the Independent Monitor with subpoena power, again, to make sure that allegations of police misconduct could be fully investigated. Over the past 20 years, the Citizen Board and the Independent Monitor have worked to improve the policies of Denver's police departments and improve the relationship and the trust between the community and law enforcement. Many, many years later, about 8 years ago, I was fortunate enough to join Reverend Peters along with Reverend Dr. Patrick Demmer and a small group in Montgomery to visit the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, our country's first national memorial to victims of lynching and racial terrorism in the United States. It's hard to describe the feeling of that memorial. The power is so immense. The weight of our country's nagging, persistent shame remains so heavy. Walking through the memorial with Reverend Peters, he spoke about his life growing up in Washington, D.C. during segregation and his fierce belief in nonviolence and nonviolent movements. He reflected on how their nonviolent tactics led more and more people to join them. He knew that we are strongest when we're united, when we're marching hand in hand. Walking next to Dr. Reverend Peters, it was impossible not to feel buoyed up by the enduring hope that he carried with him pretty much at all times. I think so many of those lessons from Reverend Dr. Peters still ring true today. As Reverend Peters' friend and mentor, Dr. King, famously said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Like many around the country today, I've felt that in recent years, the arc has not bent as far as we had hoped. But if Reverend Peters taught us one thing, it is that neither today or tomorrow is the day to bow our heads. We can't give up our work and our dreams that Dr. Peters fought so hard for. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back the floor.
Talk or me?
It's a forward-looking, candid, and communicative relationship.
I wonder if I could get your reaction to this reported $5 million settlement between the Trump administration and the family of Ashley Babbitt.
The Chief of Police of the United States Capitol Police Force clearly and plainly said, and I support the position, that the settlement was a slap in the face to the hardworking, courageous, and brave men and women of the United States Police Force. It was totally done without any communication to the chief of the Capitol Police or his lawyers, and appears solely the result of a political determination that Donald Trump and Republicans are going to try to whitewash what happened on January 6th. This settlement is just an extension of what they've previously done, which is to pardon violent felons who violently attacked Capitol on January 6th, including police officers, and now have all been pardoned and sent back to communities across the country, where in some cases, they're re-engaging in criminal activity. Donald Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans are not going to be able to erase what happened on January 6th, no matter how hard they try.
Peter Jeffers, thank you. Wanted to ask you about the discussions going on with SALT right now. Obviously, you still have a fair amount of New York Republicans who are not budging when it comes to discussions on SALT, but you have Republicans from other states that are saying otherwise. One of the more heated conversations we saw was between Congressman Tom Suozzi and Congressman Beth Van Dyne during one of the hearings, where she said Texas isn't affected by SALT. And Suozzi kept asking her over and over again, well, what about the people of New York? Tell me about your thoughts on Republicans who want to keep the SALT cap where it is, but then they say that taxpayers shouldn't get a break for choosing to live in a high tax state. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's fair for Republicans from other states to say something like this?
Yeah, states like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and Illinois and California are donor states. We regularly send billions of dollars more to the federal government than we get back in return. We are donor states. So we're not going to be lectured by people who are actually in what has sometimes been referred to as taker states, who actually receive more money every year from the federal government than they send in terms of taxpayer dollars, as to what is fair and what is right. It's actually not fair that you have many states in this country who subsidize other states. New York subsidizes other states. And so to provide some measure of relief through the state and local tax deduction, I think is a modest step toward balancing the revenues that come in and the revenues that come out. The people of New York are fine with continuing to be a donor state. But it is unfair to cap the state and local tax deduction at $10,000. And if my Republican colleagues were really interested in providing relief to middle-class taxpayers that they represent, then they would simply say and make clear that this budget should remain silent on the state and local tax deduction, because by doing nothing, the cap disappears effective December 31st of this year.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Congressman Al Green said Friday that he would force a vote on his articles of impeachment against President Trump. Where do you stand on that impeachment effort?
I haven't had a conversation with Congressman Green about it, but I look forward to that discussion.
Can you just characterize, in your view, what the impact, at least of the bill as it stands right now, would be in your district and in your home state, particularly in the context of some of these battleground districts that you're going to be litigating in a year and a half?
There are people who will lose their health care coverage across the state of New York and beyond, approximately 14 million in this country. Tens of millions of others are going to pay higher copays, premiums, and deductibles because of the significant role that Medicaid plays in the healthcare ecosystem across this country. And if you're effectively in Medicaid as we know it, it will also have an impact that is damaging on people who don't rely on Medicaid for their health insurance, but are part of the same healthcare ecosystem. Hospitals are going to close, nursing homes are going to shut down, community health clinics will shutter their doors, and people are going to die when their health care is taken away from them, all because Republicans want to provide a massive tax break to their billionaire donors like Elon Musk. That's the fundamental question that is before the Congress and the House of Representatives this week. Democrats are going to stand on the side of the American people, their health care, their nutritional assistance, their access to higher education, stand on the side of veterans and everyday Americans and people with disabilities and our children and seniors. And Republicans are continuing to stand on the side of their billionaire donors. And House Republicans in particular are once again shamefully bending the knee and serving as nothing more than a rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda. That's why he's coming up to the Hill tomorrow, to give them their marching orders. As if House Republicans work for Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, or Elon Musk. You don't. You work for the American people. And all we need are 4 House Republicans to stand up and do the right thing and push back against this one big ugly bill, and we could actually save the health care of the American people.
Do you plan to speak with President Trump at all during this process or tomorrow when he comes up here?
I have no plans to talk to President Trump.
Been very clear about your concerns, I think, week after week about reconciliation legislation. Now, as we're heading toward the final stretch here, potentially, of vote this week, can you talk a little bit about Democrat strategy and your strategy to push back in the time that's left?
Well, every single House Democrat will continue to be strongly opposed to the Republican effort to rip health care away from the American people as part of their scheme connected to the GOP tax scam to provide massive breaks to their billionaire donors like Elon Musk. We have held town hall meetings in Democratic districts and town hall meetings in Republican districts. There have been speeches and rallies and marches and sit-ins and telephone town hall meetings and press conferences, all of which will continue in different ways throughout this week and beyond. Whatever happens in the House this week doesn't necessarily signal the end of the process unless Republicans decide finally to walk away from it. And every single House Republican that chooses to vote for this reckless budget that will hurt the people they represent is going to be held accountable. This week, next week, this month, next month, this year, next year. And so I would caution my Republican colleagues to be very careful about how you proceed legislatively in terms of the votes you're being asked to take that clearly do not serve the best interests of the people we all are privileged to represent here in the House of Representatives. Last question.
Thank you, Leader. Republicans are using the package to prevent state Medicaid funding going to non-citizens. The governors of Minnesota and California have, in different ways, been cutting that off. Are they wrong to do that? Are Democrats opposed to cutting off state Medicaid programs that go to non-citizens?
What's interesting is that Republicans have tried to make this a talking point when, as far as I can tell, the overwhelming majority of people who are going to be hurt by their efforts to take away Medicaid and as a result will lose their health care are American citizens. That's the overwhelming majority of the 13.7 million people who are going to lose their health care because of Republican efforts to provide Elon Musk and their billionaire donors with a massive tax break. That's what's unacceptable. That's what's unconscionable. And that is what is un-American. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Sure.
Mr. President, today, our thoughts and prayers are with President Biden and his entire family after his cancer diagnosis this weekend. If there's one thing we all know about President Biden, it's that he's a fighter. All his life, he's faced adversity and tragedy, the worst kind. And each time his response has been the same. He's faced it with grace, with courage, and with the kind of resilience that only can come from God. This is no different. I know President Biden will face this hardship with everything he's got. So today, the entire Senate wishes Joe Biden our very best. We will pray for him, we'll root for him, and we know he will bounce back, just as he's done his whole life. Now, on the Qatar plane and the Middle East. Last week, Donald Trump concluded a visit to the Middle East that was a smashing success for his own bottom line, but a dubious outcome for America's economic and security interest. First, on the Qatari plane. Last week, Donald Trump confirmed that he would accept a $400 million luxury Boeing 747 plane offered by Qatar to use as Air Force One, the largest bribe to an American president in modern history. So today, I am introducing the Presidential Airlift Security Act, prohibiting the use of any foreign plane to be utilized as Air Force One. Senate Republicans, who say they're troubled by this Qatari gift, should join me in supporting this very common sense legislation. It should not take an act of Congress to stop the President of the United States from accepting the largest foreign bribe in modern history. But we're dealing with a president who has shown he's perfectly willing to sell out the American people and the presidency to fill his own pockets. Specifically, my legislation would prohibit even a single taxpayer dollar from being used by the Department of Defense to procure, modify, or retrofit any foreign aircraft to be used in transporting a U.S. president. For one, overhauling a foreign luxury plane to serve as Air Force One would cost billions of taxpayer dollars. The refurbishing alone would cost more than the value of the plane itself. And it would take years. It's a senseless waste of taxpayer resources. Using a foreign plane as Air Force One would also bring unimaginable national security risks. National security experts from one end of the country to the other agree. No matter how many modifications are made, or how much is spent, or how intensely it's retrofitted, there will never be 100% confidence that the plane is secure. This is not a gamble anyone should be willing to take. It makes no practical sense for Donald Trump to accept this luxury gift when other alternatives in the works are less risky and less costly for taxpayers. This gift reeks of corruption and naked self-enrichment. It reeks of corruption and naked self-enrichment. And Republicans should stand up and support our bill, defend national security, and protect Americans. In the meantime, I will continue my hold on all political Department of Justice nominees until we get more answers about this clearly unethical deal. Now on the Saudi chip deal. Today, I'm joining with Senator Warren to lead Senate Democrats in calling on Secretaries Lutnick and Rubio to hit pause on a number of chip deals Donald Trump announced last week with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. I am alarmed that these deals announced by Donald Trump, which involve the most advanced AI-related semiconductors, have national security threat written all over them. Without clear and enforceable protections, I'm worried that these chips will gradually end up in the hands of the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, given how cozy the Saudi and Emiratis have been with the Chinese. Recent history shows that when foreign countries end up with American-made chips, the Chinese government, the CCP, and their related companies get a hold of these chips. DeepSeek's AI model was precisely accomplished with US-made chips. Now Donald Trump wants to potentially open up another loophole with his Middle East chip deals. Over the years, Chinese companies and the CCP have forged deep ties with the same Middle Eastern countries that Donald Trump is now giving unfettered access to our most advanced AI chips. No serious national security expert would tell you this is on the level. It not only threatens our security, but also risks cannibalizing the U.S. build-out of AI. If we want to stay number one in AI, which we all do, this is the wrong deal. Why is Donald Trump building the future of AI in the Middle East, not in America? We all know that he's desperate. Trump is desperate to show the world he's Mr. Art of the deal. But he's so desperate to tout these deals that he's not thinking and protecting the long-term security and jobs implications to our country. With this deal, American AI chips are being given to the highest bidder at the expense of the American people and American dominance in the rapidly growing and important field of AI. On the hostages in Gaza, last week we witnessed a moment of hope, the release of American, Israeli, and New Jersey resident Idan Alexander, former New Jersey resident Idan Alexander.